everybody. Welcome to another podcast with the Artist Simply. You can find it at artistsimply.podbean.com or now on iTunes. Thank you, Morgan, and thank you to Kurt behind the scenes. Today we're going to talk with Stan Miller. He's been teaching classes here for a number of years. I'm co-host number one today. Let's bring in co-host number two, Morgan. Hello.
Hello.
She is famous from many other podcasts on the series.
Well, many being one, which is also the Artsy Dweeb, and you can also find me at Artist Simply.
I missed my chance to call her the Artsy Dweeb. Oh, okay. Can we start over? No, I'm kidding. Awesome. So as we welcome him in, Stan Miller, we're going to ask him a little about his art, his teaching, and if there's anything he wants to get off his chest. We have a little fun near the end. Stan has been an artist for over 40 years. His resume includes a number of solo shows, awards including most recently 2018's first place in portraiture for the Global Association of Watercolors. Stan writes for an array of periodicals and teaches both in person as well as a growing number of other locations, including California, North Carolina, and France. That sounds great. And in 2 dozen plus YouTube videos, you have one focused watercolor artist. Hello, Stan.
Hi.
How are things?
Very good.
Good. So let's go to the beginning. What's your first memory ever? No, I'm kidding. No, let's not go back that far. So in doing a little research, you say, or you line out, you started in South Dakota, moved to Spokane at the age of 15. You originally planned to be a PE major, you say, and in college you started taking art classes, and you eventually ended up with both a commercial and applied arts degree. Mm-hmm. You started both selling your art and teaching early in your career. It sounds like embracing art may have always been in the grand plan for you, but what was the event, the moment, the sale that kind of aha, it was a moment or a week or a year, that happened that you knew that you would be able to put away your whistle and your tight gym teacher shorts and embrace art? When did you know?
Well, first of all, I always enjoyed art. I think most kids do, but in terms of earliest memory, I just remember probably from the time I was very young, doing any kind of art was terrific. One of the influences of me getting excited about art was my older brother would draw, and he could draw. He liked to draw cars and mountains and roads and stuff and ships coming through the water like they were headed right at you. And I would just watch him draw and go, wow. So I started to learn some of the basics of drawing and perspective from him. Then probably one of the biggest changes when I was young, when I was 7, my dad knew a friend of his, Randy Penner in Wisconsin, was a full-time professional artist. He was married, lived in the woods. They had 1 or 2 children. And on our vacation, I had heard we were going to stop by there. And I remember getting out of the car, walking to this house, seeing it sitting there as I approached it, the stone walkway, and I felt like I was going to God's house. I thought, I can't believe I'm actually going to a real artist's house. And as I walked up through the door and I looked to my left and right, I wanted to see the paintings on the walls. And I saw the paintings, and then I saw him, and I met his wife, but I was only 7, and there were 6 of us kids, so the big concern was that we were going to trash their house. But I saw the studio. I did find out I had evidently knocked a lamp over, my mom said. But seeing a real artist who made a living as an artist, I didn't know any artists when I grew up who were practicing artists and did it full time. And so this really stuck with me. I thought it can be done. And it stays with me to this very day. So that was when I was 7. So going through middle school, I took art classes. I took mechanical drawing. In high school, I took art classes and perspective. And then in college, I still didn't think I'd be able to make a living as a regular painter artist. So they had a 3-year graphic design course out at Spokane Falls Community College. I took that, but while taking that, we also were required to take a number of classes in fine art. So I took figure drawing, life drawing, oil painting, 3 years of oil painting, and ended up going there 4 years. And it was the last year where I really kind of got into watercolor, which is what I'm most known for. And I really enjoyed watercolor. So I graduated in 73, and I thought, and I'd sold a few watercolors for like $10 a piece in the bookstore. And I thought, I'm going to try to make a living as a watercolorist. So I bought my brother's car for $100. I found a house to rent for $85 a month. This is back in 1973. I thought if I paint 6 days a week, 12 hours a day, and I do this for 10 years, and I can just pay my bills, I figured I need $200 a month. And I thought, wouldn't that be great if I'd be able to follow my dream and do what I want to do? And that's what I did. Here I am.
Can you rewind just a second and tell us? I'm very curious because I listened in on when you were talking about that you also took 3 years of oil painting.
Yeah.
How did you decide that watercolor was your forte, that it was your love instead of oil?
Well, oil painting is very obedient. You put color down, it sits right there, and it doesn't move, it doesn't change color. Watercolor was very frustrating because you put it down, it moves. You put it down, it always looks brighter and more colorful when you first put it down. When it dries, it looks a little bit lighter, not as intense. So I hated watercolor, but I didn't like oil. Oil was fine, it got straight A's, but oil for me was boring. I tell my students that painting in watercolor to me is like training your dog. Painting in oil is like training your dog. Painting in watercolor is like training your cat. And I love cats. And I love a challenge, and watercolor was constantly telling me, you can't control me. And that's what sucked me in. I loved this medium. I never knew for sure what was going to happen, and that's part of what pulled me into watercolor.
You realize now that we're going to have to conduct a study of how many oil painters are dog people and how many watercolor people are cat people.
Which may explain why Morgan likes watercolor. She's a cat person.
Yeah.
Yep, happen to love cats.
And I like Doritos, so that it works out well.
Makes perfect sense.
Yes.
Yeah.
Which means that he's not an artist.
So the one question I have, your brother that you originally saw and looked at his work, and did he ever go into arts? Did you outpace him?
No, he went into engineering, and he didn't like it, so he didn't practice it. I think he graduated from WSU, I'm one of 7 actually, and my younger brother Scott, he was a graphic designer for Microsoft during the heyday in the 80s and 90s, and then he went into other aspects of the computer industry. My sister Lois in Coeur d'Alene is not a professional interior designer, but man, she could have been. Incredible sense of design and stuff. And my sister Carol likes poetry. She writes a lot of poetry. Not professionally, really. She's had some poems published. Yeah, I always liked the visual art world. And so, that's the direction I went.
Okay. And if a young person comes to you and says, I want to embrace art, go to college for art, is that advice you give? Do you say, hey, let's put... I went for a music degree, and I don't use my music degree. I can be honest about that. And I kind of tell people, hey, go for a marketing degree, but do the part you like. You went for a commercial, which is very hands-on, very job-oriented. Would you give a young person advice to follow their artistic dream, or?
Well, I mentioned the book by Malcolm Gladwell called Outliers. He's the guy who came up with 10,000 hours, and he analyzes all kinds of people, all kinds of situations, including the Beatles and how did they become so good, and hockey players from Canada, etc. And what he finds out with most professionals, there's kind of a general 10,000 hours of practice before you start to become professional. And when I read that, I thought that's pretty true with myself as well. So when somebody comes to me, and I do get emails quite often, somebody's seen my work and they're thinking about trying to become a professional artist, and I tell them the most important thing is not talent. The most important thing is you got to have desire, and you have to really want to make it happen, and you have to settle in for the long haul. At least 10,000 hours of focused practice, not too much diversity. If you try oil painting, pastels, watercolor, portraits, landscape, abstract realism, it's too much diversity. It's like somebody wanting to become a good musician and they play too many instruments. It's very hard to become really good at one if you're constantly trying all kinds of music and all kinds of instruments. Same thing with a lot of people approach me about wanting to become good. They're too diversified. They're trying all kinds of stuff. Very hard to become really good if you're all over the place.
Interesting. Very cool. So, in prepping for this, I watched a lot of your YouTube. Enjoy that. It's almost like watching a cooking show. You see everything chopped up and explained, and it would be very cool to do. you'd say in one of your videos that the hardest part of any artwork is the composition. If this is the case, there are very few composition classes that fill.
Right.
It's tough to fill that class. Should artists focus more on composition? Would that be part of your advice to get better on top of your 10,000 hours? Or is it something that you can, if you focus on the paint, focus on more specifics, can you build that? Do you think it would help artists?
Well, composition as it relates to the artist is very similar to the role of composition in design and learning how to write. So if I'm teaching a beginning watercolor class or a beginning writing and reading class, if it's writing, I teach them how to make an A, a B, a C, a D. And then I write a word, and then a sentence, and then a paragraph. And I'm not going to mention composition to them for at least, 10,000 hours, because they have to learn how to write really, really well before they're really going to understand the role of composition. And in painting as well, my beginners, I don't mention composition and design to them because it's too many balls in the air. It's like juggling. So with a lot of my students, I won't mention composition. But for my advanced students, I do get some advanced students. And for them, in the end, composition in all arts, in music, in writing, in making movies, even in composing a great meal, composition is about making everything works with everything. Not one part stands out above it. You love the whole movie, you love the whole book, you love the whole painting. And the biggest weakness, I jury exhibitions and shows around the country, the biggest reason a painting gets rejected is they overdo one point of interest. They have one part of their painting that is much more dramatic and exciting than the rest of it. It's like if you have one, everybody comes out of the movie and says, yeah, that was the best part. That's not a good movie. The best movie is when they all like different favorite parts. The best meal is they all like different parts of the meal. That's good composition, and it's the hardest thing to teach. They're my least, lessons 1, 2, and 3 on YouTube are my least viewed videos, and people don't understand them. Yeah. I mean, the comments, when you look underneath them, they say things like, there, I've watched them. It's probably a student. I said, you should watch this. So it's extremely hard to teach. It's like music theory. It's one thing to teach somebody how to play the piano, but when you start telling them to incorporate jazz with classical and then give me a 5/7 time rhythm to it and have the composition evolve from a kind of a contemporary feel into classical hip hop. That's the way you think in composition. That's a long ways away from just put your fingers on the piano key and play a simple song. So composition in all arts is the final frontier. It's very hard to teach. But if you are a great composer in making movies, in writing books, in painting pictures, you're going to become known. You will become somewhat famous because the really best in their fields, they're master composers, they're master designers in all fields of art. Those are the ones, you can't get to the top without being brilliant at composition and design. That's the final frontier.
Interesting. I had when I was working towards my music degree, I had in a composition class, one of the guys said, you just go write, and then maybe the 10,000 hour theory. You just write and write and write, and for 3 years, everything you write is going to be bad.
Yeah.
He goes, but someday you're going to figure it out, whether it's tricks, learning.
Yeah, sounds like the 10,000 hours.
And you'll be able to figure out. Unfortunately, I couldn't stick with it at that time.
Yeah.
But, what do you do?
It's tough, whether it's music, painting. Very, very few. I told somebody the other day, I have had, I think, 2 students in 40 years of teaching art in Spokane who have gone on to become professional painters. 2 students, and I've had thousands of students. And why did they go on? Because they practice more than anybody else.
Interesting.
They both quit their jobs, and they started painting 40, 50, 60 hours a week. Don Clegg was one of them, a friend of mine. He only took lessons from me, but he got it. A very sharp guy, he got it right away. Within 3 years, he got into the National Watercolor Society, became a member. And then Watson Guptill, I believe, did a book of still lifes on his work. The guy learned at an incredible rate, but the guy was painting 6 days a week, 10, 12 hours a day. He was he was just painting like crazy. Those are always the best students. The ones who there's so much passion for it. Degas, the great sculptor, when he finally got into art school, he was 16, 17, his friends would bring him food in the middle of the night because he wouldn't take a break to eat. That's passion, and that's what's behind Michelangelo's, the Rembrandts, the people who are really good. They are so driven. They want to learn this so much that you have to get out of their way. And those are my best students. Most students just do it as a hobby, which is fine. That means they're normal. They're probably happier than the rest of us. But for me, it's always been a passion. That's why I'm very passionate when I teach. I always assume my students want to become the next Leonardo da Vinci, so.
Going back to YouTube, I'm watching these videos. There's a portrait video, and it's truly like that cooking. You say you copy everything and you put every brush stroke in, and it's this detail. Mm-hmm. And in that video, you say you can use any blue, any red, any yellow to paint, any brush, any paper. Why do you hate art stores?
Well, I don't hate art stores, but I have picked on art stores, and it's not so much the art store. Actually, I love art stores because without them, I wouldn't be able to do what I do. But the thing that frustrates me, just about answer the question, what's one of my get off my chest?
Here we go.
Would be people who are so in love with shopping for art supplies.
Whoa!
I had
to cut that part out.
I had a student. An older woman, she contacted me a couple of years ago and said, Stan, I've got a bunch of art supplies, and why don't you come over here, and if there's anything you want, I'll give it to you. So I go over to her house. She just lived a few miles away from me. I go into her house, go into the back room. She had what I probably estimated $10,000 to $50,000 worth of art supplies. She had a brand new art desk, still had plastic wrapped around it. She had whole sets of acrylics and oils, and she had brushes in cases, little boxes that had never been opened. It looked like an art supply store. And I said, what's going on here? And she said, I like to buy art supplies. But I'm thinking, well, that's great, but how much do you like to paint and use the art supplies? The key thing is, art supplies are great, but if you are more in love with buying art supplies and painting, I'm going, that's being so in love with shoes that you never go out walking because you're too busy shopping for shoes,
Maybe she was using her 10,000 hours
to shop.
To shop. That was what she was trying
shopper.
to get good at.
Yeah.
That's very cool. Quick follow-up on that for any of you shoppers. We'll just make a mention. Stan does have a little set put together with 5 colors. Happens to be M-Gram color. In that, you put Azo yellow, Cad red light, Quin rose, and Phthalo blue. Are those your favorite colors? Why did you pick those 5 to start with? Just out of curiosity.
I introduce color to my students, and when I travel around the country as well. The beginning understanding of color, the way I teach it, is just use red, yellow, and blue. And with red, yellow, and blue, if you're lucky, you can come up with a green, a purple, and an orange. And if you mix red, yellow, and blue together, you get various forms of browns and grays. So that's what I call establishing a skill to use what we call approximate or general color. So if you use any red, yellow, and blue, you're really in a ballpark understanding of using color. But then if you specify which red, which yellow, which blue, then you can get closer to just using 3 colors, pretty close to getting a lot of colors that you see all around us, including skin color, whatever. But if a lot of people call like ultramarine blue, ultramarine is a very reddish blue. There's Prussian blue or turquoise blue, which is a very greenish blue. So if you just grab any blue and you end up picking up a turquoise blue, you're going to find it nearly impossible. When you mix that blue with the red, you will not get purple because your blue has too much green in it. So when you go to a 3-color system and you get like a phthalo blue and like just a cadmium red or just a quinacridone rose, and then you get like an azo or a Hansa yellow, you're going to get a pretty good orange, a pretty good purple, and a pretty good green out of those 3 colors. So then if you want to perfect that a little bit more, you could move up to a 5-color system. So my 5-color system, I think, has those 3 colors, and it might have 2 reds and 2 yellows as well. So then we can get, with those 5 colors, we can get probably 95, 98% accuracy with just those 5-color systems. The worst case is, the nightmare, which I see quite a bit, is the student will show up, in one case, showed up with 3 full-size palettes covered with different colors, all spread out on her table. And I approached her the first day and I said, let me guess, are you frustrated with color? And she just gave this big sigh. She said, how did you know? And when you see somebody who has colors everywhere, they are in color hell. They have no clue how to use color. So if you want to teach somebody color, you take away all their colors and you give them just red, yellow, and blue. At the old printer systems, our printers, house computer printers, red, yellow, blue, and black. 3-color system with black. So you can get a lot of color if you have the right red, yellow, and blue. That's where you first, if you learn how to mix color using red, yellow, and blue, and then add colors to your palette, you're going to learn colors so much quicker than if you start out trying to buy all these colors and trying to figure out how to use them.
Know that you love M. Graham watercolors. And can you tell us anything as to why? What draws you to them, or why they happen to be a favorite of yours?
Well, I used to use Winsor Newton nearly exclusively for many years. Loved Winsor Newton. And but nearly all watercolors, when they dry, I'd paint outside on location, summer day, and but they get hard when they would dry. Graham's put honey in their paint, and the honey keeps the paint softer. So I can have the paint sitting out there, even with my palette wide open, and it still retains a certain softness, which I love. That is what I really like. Plus, they're great colors. I think the guy started Graham's at one point, worked for Winsor Newton.
Grumbacher,
Yeah,
one of the big.
or Grumbacher, yeah.
In your palette, approximately how many colors are on your palette? Now, I know you're not a beginner. You don't need the 5. You've expanded to what you like.
Well, most professionals, I've met a lot of professional watercolors around the world, traveling and stuff. I'd say the average one has maybe 8, 10, 12 colors. Very few will have more than that, because if you get too many colors, you can't keep track of them. You have to know your colors really well. You have to know how they respond. So you I probably have 10, 12, 14 colors I use at the most. And I never want more than that, because you can't keep track of them. And once you can no longer understand how each color you have is going to interact with your other colors, and if you have 20 or 30, you can't do that. You have way too many. And hardly any professional would have that many colors. Now, in pastel, it's different. Pastel, you have to have a lot of color. But in oils or watercolors, oils, you'd have to have a little bit more. Watercolor, you mix them more than you do in oil and in pastel.
Interesting. Do you have white on your palette?
Yeah, I use white, yeah.
Do you have black?
I have black, but I don't use black in my beginners use black or a Payne's gray. And we paint for 3 weeks just using black, so they can concentrate on what I call the foundation principles of painting, and that is, you have to get the drawing right and you have to get the values right. Values are much, much more important than color. And then once they can learn how to get the values correct, then we move into the 3-color system.
In another video, you say that it's your video on color, and you have an apple and a banana, and you actually physically move it around your house, different light sources and the like. And you say there's no standard color for anything, and that all colors change. How do you decide if you say, hey, I'm doing the still life, and you're making it something, or if you're out painting outside, how do you decide which color goes where? Are you trying to copy exactly what you see to build, boom, there it is, I'm going to paint it? Do you say, I like this color right now, and as you say, value is very important. I want to do contrast values and a point of interest. Does that trump what you see, or how do you approach that?
Well, and speaking of color, this also ties into getting it off my chest,
Nice.
you might say, and that is that everywhere I go, everybody is in love with color and technique. And this is a bit of an exaggeration, but not too much. in terms of creating a powerful painting, color and technique are the two most unimportant issues that you should pursue. If I tell my students, if you pursue everything else and do them with high expertise, you know how to draw like Michelangelo. You understand values like Rembrandt. You understand how light can create mood. You pick subjects that have a powerful message. You arrange your painting in a way in which it's incredible design, and then paint with whatever color you want. Paint with your left foot, paint with your shoe, paint with your right elbow, and all you're going to hear for the rest of your life, people are going to be in love with your color and your technique. Because when everything else is strong, the way the average person responds to it is, that painting is really striking me. It must be the color. It's usually the last reason why you like the painting. It's a big illusion. People think the color is the reason they like a painting. No, it's everything else. So I don't pursue color. I don't try to make getting the right color an important thing. I just, as long as it's generally okay. But the thing I hear the most about my work is everybody, I post a portrait on YouTube or Instagram. Everybody wants to know what colors I use. You know, in fact, at one point, I posted a portrait that happened a few years ago. And I did the whole painting using red, yellow, and blue. And it looked very real, flesh tones and everything. And somebody said, what colors did you use? And I said, red, yellow, and blue. And he spoke a little profanity and ended it with you. And I sent him a message. I said, really, I used red, yellow, and blue. You ought to give it a try. And he tried it. I think he says, wow, that's amazing. It works. And he says, I really apologize for what I said. I'd had a bad day. So, but yeah, pursuing color and technique is, talk about going down the wrong road. I don't know any good artist who pursues color and technique as a high priority. That's not what you chase. It's like you're learning how to write and your goal is to have beautiful penmanship. Instead of wanting to be a great writer, your goal is to have beautiful penmanship. So everybody would say you have beautiful penmanship. No. Your goal should not be to have beautiful penmanship. It's nice if you do. It's nice if you have nice color and technique. But if you have books that shake the world, if you tell stories that change people's way of looking at life, you've done something. But when you're constantly trying to create pretty technique and color, you're going nowhere. That's not going to lead to anything. That's my opinion anyhow.
Very cool. Speaking of books, anything that you've read lately that you enjoyed?
I like anything to do with art books. One of my favorite books was about Rodin, Naked Came I. It's an old book, but his sculptor, but just his his hunger to to become good at art. And Agony and the Ecstasy about Michelangelo. I think that was written by Irving Stone. And Pride and Glory, I think, was about Monet and the Impressionists. There's another movie out called Pride and Glory, but this one is from quite a while ago. And but I like art books. I've read nearly any book written about Andrew Wyeth, who's probably one of my favorite artists, American painter, Andrew Wyeth.
So is it safe to say that the Pride and Glory you're referring to is not the cop drama? It is, in fact, the art.
Pride and I probably have the title wrong, but I thought it was called Pride and Glory because the French Impressionists, it starts out with Monet in the 1850s and 60s. They are trying to establish themselves as a totally unique and different way of approaching painting. Impressionism. They were accused of not finishing their paintings. One of the things they were trying to establish was a pride. They wanted to have pride in their work. They wanted their fellow French citizens to have pride. And they wanted some recognition and glory for what they were doing. And they were getting very little recognition. Mm-hmm. And that's a great book, whatever it's called, whether it's Pride and Glory or not.
Well, let me throw one more question at you, and then we're going to finish with our 6 questions that we're going to ask everybody. So just in a nutshell, as a quick wrap-up question, have you noticed a change in the 40 years that you've been doing art? You say originally you sold 2 paintings in the bookstore. This world of prints, giclées, digital artwork, do you have any advice for the artists? Go try to license your stuff, sell originals. Do you have some success? Do you have something that you've found that has worked?
Well, I can only speak for myself. I'm a realist. I do a lot of portraits and landscapes. And the market for my kind of work is dramatically diminished because the buyers of my work throughout my career were the baby boomer generation. And they not only did they like art, they liked all kinds of stuff. They liked big houses, they liked pots and all. They just were the best shoppers in the world. The younger people today, maybe they don't have quite the money. They're not interested in huge homes. They're not interested in filling their homes with expensive artwork. So it makes it really hard to sell your work today. So all these baby boomers now want to learn how to paint, though. So I've shifted. I'm doing a lot more teaching, and I don't sell as much. I don't try as hard to sell my work anymore, but it's pretty tough. So I wouldn't, in terms of other artists, for me, prints don't sell very much. My work's real popular, but nobody wants to buy it, so I don't know why that is. So.
You had a couple of rants. So is there anything else that you wanted to give you a full chance to get those rants, to get that, in church we call it the praise or prayer, good or bad.
Right.
So if there's anything that you want to add to the mix in your rants.
No, I think I've already done that a little bit.
Yeah.
I just want to say that I teach 8th graders on Fridays, 14-year-olds, and I love teaching them. And I always tell them, I said, your parents may not want to hear this, but I say, follow your dreams.
Oh, dear.
Do not give up on your dreams. Go for it. Don't let your parents or anybody tell you not to do it. I mean, for me to do what I did, it was a crazy dream, but I absolutely love my life. If I lived it again, I'd hopefully live it the same way. I feel like I'm the luckiest guy in the world.
So you're going to basically come back a year from now and have a whole classroom of YouTubers.
Yeah,
That's
okay.
what's going to happen.
Yeah, right, okay. Yeah, follow your dreams, whatever it is. Go for it.
Well, I have a 14-year-old at home. I'll tell him.
Yeah.
His dream so far, I think, is Mountain Dew and his own YouTube video. So we'll see.
Or a YouTube channel.
Yeah.
I've got 65 subscribers, so go for it. And I wasn't even trying to create a channel. I was just posting watercolor lessons, so it's taken off pretty good.
That's very cool.
Yeah.
So to finish up, much like the Actors Studio finishes with their 10 questions, the following 6 questions are based on an Azerbaijani spoken word artist Salman Kadvudlo's 86 questions from Baku. What we'd like to ask these questions of you, just quick,
Okay.
just whatever comes to the top of your mind. 1, what is your favorite color?
I love all colors equally. I always tell my students, that's like asking a pianist, what's your favorite piano key?
Okay, I believe that is wrong, but no.
Yes, right.
If you could create a piece of art for one famous person, living or dead, who would it be?
I don't have a clue. Nothing pops in.
What is keeping you up at night?
A bad TV show.
Which leads into the next question. What's the last thing you binged?
Binge. Pizza's my great weakness. I love pizza.
We can meet in the middle on that. Your order for your last meal? You may have just answered it already. But
Order was...
no, if it's your last meal, it's you're being dragged out.
Oh, you mean like
your last
death row?
Meal. Yes.
Oh, it'd be pizza.
Yeah,
It'd be
okay.
pizza.
We can probably answer pizza for a lot of these. And
Yeah.
if the world goes back to black and white, all visual art is shelved, what would you do to fill the void?
Well, yeah, a lot of great... Ansel Adams, black and white photographer, one of the great work. I'm not sure if that's what you mean, but
That's if
black and white, you can still have powerful art that changes the world, even if you don't have color. So
Awesome. Very cool.
Wonderful.
Well,
Well,
host Morgan?
yes, and Stan, thank you for agreeing
Craig.
to
you bet.
have a podcast meeting with us. And again, Craig, thank you for helping helm this interview today.
Hopefully I'll push my way into a few more of these and we'll have some fun.